Okay, good afternoon. We like to always be dynamic at the Office of the Special Representative, and so in an effort to be dynamic, we're going to change it up a little bit, and we're going to allow for the interventions that were requested at the end of panel 3. We're going to allow for those now so that the participating states who've asked to speak at the end of panel 3 have a chance to speak now before panel 4. And the first two will come from Belgium and Ukraine, which I will introduce in just a second. However, while the participating states are getting their statements ready, I wanted to make a technical announcement, which is that, as always, your feedback on the organization and content of the conference is very important to us. With this in mind, we have created a short online survey that you will be able to complete on the spot at the end of the conference. And an example of the survey is up on the screen, although don't do it yet because we're not done. So to ensure that this runs smoothly, I would be grateful if at the end of panel 4 you could have your mobile phones ready and connected to the internet so that you can participate in the survey. We're very excited to take in your feedback and your comments. With that, we are going to move to the interventions, and I will note that there is a due to our time constraints, we're asking the interventions to stick strictly to 2 minutes. And with that, I'll turn it over to the representative from Belgium.
Merci
Thank you for having reorganized the speaking time. I'd like to start by thanking the OSCE for their contribution to combating human trafficking and the different speakers, and particularly panel 3, which I found very interesting and which fits with my own thoughts. Given that I come from the Justice Department, I would like to share a few reflections with you in terms of recommendations. First of all, concerning the statements made by Madame Verbeek-Koesters. For me, it seems essential to involve today for me, a recommendation that would be important is to involve in the national coordination mechanisms the financial intelligence units, and to involve them in the national dialogue on combating human trafficking. We do this officially in Belgium. We have involved them in our coordination center, and we are working also in new dimensions by developing lists of warning signs that are looking at the financial aspects, at identifying financial transactions that could be an indicator of human trafficking. And we also worked with the Belgian Federation of Banks. And so we are essentially involved in a new process here, a new discussion with the sector itself, and there's added value to draw from this work. The other thought that I'd like to share with you today is to inform you that in 2017, our national rapporteur, our independent rapporteur, published a report specifically analyzing the use of internet by criminal networks, looking at the different dossiers that have been analyzed in Belgium. This is a tool that's available on our site, the Myria site, which is our national rapporteur. You can look on Google Myria 2017 National Report on Human Trafficking. I won't build on what has already been said, but I'd like to just share a couple of recommendations which I think could be interesting for you. It was noted that much has been done regarding work on sexual exploitation using the internet, but it would also be good to work further with social inspections, for example, work on these aspects, because there's this whole dimension of economic exploitation, which is also important, and this is also increasing through internet use too. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I turn next to Ukraine, followed by Liechtenstein.
Добрый день.
Good afternoon. I represent the Ukrainian Cyber Police Department, and I would like to briefly tell you about the work of our department, including our work in combating human trafficking. Firstly, I wanted to, on behalf of our Department of Cyber Police, to thank the coordinators of the OSCE project coordinator in the OSCE for our long-term cooperation and for the help in fighting crime and human trafficking, as well as for the fora they have held and the trainings they have held on the topic of combating trade in human trafficking. Our National Police Department on this area tries to stem the use of technology for this crime. We work with the Department on combating human trafficking with OSCE that need assistance in our country to do this work. This year, the staff of the department have established 2 cases of the distribution of child pornography on the internet. First of all, this is an actress who used her young son to create pornographic materials. She shot videos and she placed them on specialized closed forum on the darknet. And also, there was information from colleagues about a studio in Ukraine where child pornography is developed. A 50-year-old citizen of Ukraine used his photo studio for child pornography, and he distributed it through the internet. We have also found out that there are children from the age of 9 to 17 who were pulled into this illegal activity. Internationally, we work and cooperate with law enforcement of other countries, including with Europol and Eurojust. As a result of our cooperation last year, we have exposed 8 cases of illegal activities. At the legislative level, we have established a draft law on amending certain laws of Ukraine in order to implement the norms and conventions on cybercrime. The draft law also provides for telecommunication providers and operators on the demand of law enforcement to present information that is needed to identify the individual persons, and also to open communication networks of information sources as decided so by courts. We believe that in order to efficiently fight crime, including human trafficking, we need to ensure that there's cooperation with European Union institutions that work in law enforcement. This would be to share strategic information 24 hours a day, to gather evidence as well, to create investigation groups, and to organize working visits of law enforcement in neighboring states to exchange experience in order to combat international crime. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much. Next, we will turn to Liechtenstein, followed by Belarus.
Thank you very much for giving me the floor. I would like to use this occasion to draw your attention to the Liechtenstein Initiative for a Financial Sector Commission on Modern Slavery and Human Trafficking, which was mentioned by Henny Verbeek-Kusters, who is a member of the Commission. It is based on an idea from an earlier cooperation between Liechtenstein and the United Nations University, which resulted in a report on 25 keys to unlock the financial chains associated with human trafficking. It is a public-private partnership between Liechtenstein, Australia, the Netherlands, United Nations University, together with the financial sector and NGOs. It is currently holding global consultations. The results are expected in autumn. Among the topics discussed are due diligence and protection of the financial sector from risks associated with money laundering and terrorist financing related to human trafficking, guidance on understanding and identifying the proceeds coming from human trafficking, best practices in addressing these phenomena, lessons learned on regulatory policies and practices, innovations in responsible investment and lending practices, and innovative financing mechanisms to address the drivers of modern slavery and human trafficking. In the final report, the Commission will present an action plan for coordinated evidence-based initiatives to strengthen the financial sector's role in tackling financing of human trafficking. And we are certain that this opens up areas of cooperation and stand ready to present the results in relevant OSCE fora. More information is available on financialsectorcommission.org. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Next, we turn to Belarus, followed by Finland.
I'd like to thank the OSCE Special Coordinator and the organizers of this conference for the chance to take part in this high-level event. And I would also like to thank the interpreters who are helping us, representatives of different countries, to be able to understand each other and to work effectively together, communicate. I come from the Belarusian Investigative Committee. This is an independent state body. It is responsible for legal proceedings, including against combating human trafficking, the issue of combating child trafficking, including in the internet. This is a global issue, and for our country also, criminal business is today present everywhere in the internet. This has changed the nature of the work of the law enforcement bodies. The main instrument for detecting child trafficking for sexual exploitation, especially child pornography in the internet, is now specialized information tools, software, technology, search systems. And so an important task for us is to train our investigators, to train our personnel to use these new technologies, to use the results in the operations and in launching criminal proceedings, to establish common standards. We are training within the Interior Ministry and the investigative community, and next Thursday, in fact, we will be holding a training event in Belarus, in the town of Mogilev in Belarus. We will have people from different agencies coming there, and also from public organizations that take part in our work. This year we will also hold a number of events in Minsk, including an expanded training and seminar and on combating child trafficking on the internet, the legal aspects and the technological possibilities. We are also conducting a number of investigations, directly or indirectly, connected to child pornography, to protecting children's rights, and to protecting the victims of these crimes. And the results of our work, we publish them openly in the media and in our agency journal, on the site of the investigative committee, and also the specialized site of our magazine. Our subscribers include the subscribers to our magazine, the print version. We've got many subscribers from different areas, and we work very closely with the legal community here, of course. We are also this year, based on the results of our work, we are preparing a research conference on the 30th anniversary of the Convention on the Rights of the Child, where we will look at not just the legal regulation and the detection of such crimes, but also protecting the rights of children who are victims of sexual abuse. And we invite the OSCE and the members of the Alliance to take part in our conference. We would be happy to see you in Belarus. We will give you additional information about these events, and we will be very pleased if our partners abroad show interest in what we're doing. After all, cooperation and exchange of experience is one of the main tools in fighting human trafficking in the area of information technology. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next, we turn to Finland, followed by Greece.
Thank you. First, I'd like to thank all the panelists and other speakers who have shared their insights and experiences. I would also like to thank OSCE for its anti-trafficking work and for putting together this event. We have learned a lot. A strong message that has come through in this conference is that technology can work both ways, for good or for bad. It can be used to facilitate or enable running a high-profit, low-risk trafficking business, or for catching the traffickers and protecting the victims. We consider that a wide approach is needed to stop trafficking. Authorities cannot do this by themselves. We need partnerships with businesses, NGOs, academia, and different walks of life. And we need to listen to the survivors. In this regard, I'd like to extend special thanks to Ms. Melanie Thompson for being and speaking here. It has become clear in this conference that we also need partnerships with tech companies and technological experts because they can play a key role. Ambassador Richmond advised yesterday to put need before solution and to keep it simple when coming up with technological solutions. There's a lot of wisdom in this. While it's been made crystal clear that technology is not a magic wand nor a silver bullet, I do feel inspired by the solutions and applications I have seen and heard about during these 2 days. They're based on simple ideas and clear needs, and they can be very effective. We will have a lot to take home from this conference. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. We will next turn to Greece, followed by the NGO Phoenix of Kazakhstan.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, for giving us the floor. First of all, I would like to thank OSCE for the organization of this conference and all the panelists. It was an excellent example of public-private partnership, and I wish that we can meet each other more often at the field of action as well. So I would like to focus on the issue of this conference, namely the use of technology to prevent and fight against human trafficking and to protect and rehabilitate victims. The Office of the National Rapporteur undertakes two large initiatives in including technology tools into the national anti-trafficking response. And I will refer to them quickly, and we welcome interested partners, of course. So first, in collaboration with the Rights Lab at the University of Nottingham, we discussed the initiation of a pilot study to investigate whether Greece could use public satellites to locate areas where forced labor or other forms of human exploitation takes place. The idea is that the satellites to provide the initial hint in relation to the areas that should be further explored by specialized task forces or other technology tools. The second initiative has to do with the Council of the City of Athens and the development of a pilot study, which is going to take place with the collaboration of the OSCE as well, and from partners from the private sector. So what we tend to do, we tend to develop a pilot study which will study the supply chains of the Council of Athens from the beginning to the end, including recruitment procedures, risk assessment, capacity building of procurement personnel, contracts with companies supplying goods to the City Council, among others, in order to identify gaps and risky areas which could allow human exploitation. After identifying those gaps and risky areas, corrective movements will be made, and a simulation study will be applied to identify those procedures and strategies that could secure that the City of Athens supply chains are free from any form of human exploitation. Finally, I would like to let you know that our national referral mechanism, which was launched on the 1st of January 2019 and has been built according to the most demanding standards, actually already plans its future development. And we would like to examine whether this NRM could function as a smart platform of communication with vulnerable people themselves, not only with services and professionals. And we would also like to examine in the future whether our NRM could be linked with other social protection platforms, national or regional. In terms of recommendations, I would like just to let you know that I would like to see more health-related technology included in our discussions in the future. And prevention must be promoted through technology as well. I think the technology must be the means for more prevention activities. Finally, I would like to make the statement that we need more basic research, as many panelists have already underlined. However, we have few funding schemes for basic research. So the EU, international organizations, the states, private foundations have to actually include basic research in their funding schemes in order to have more evidence-based policies. Thank you very much for giving us the floor and for organizing this really excellent conference.
Thank you very much. We now turn to the NGO Phoenix.
Ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. I would like to use this opportunity to also express our gratefulness to the Secretariat of the OSCE for this invitation and opportunity to speak at this event. The NGOs in Kazakhstan are mostly organizations that have a great deal of experience over 15, 20 years. Today, of course, the information communication technologies are a powerful way of recruiting victims that are used to place ads on social networks. A priori, the potential victims are recruited through messenger services, and they use online resources and websites. Sooner or later, they become victims of cyber exploitation and become the victims of slavery. Kazakhstan works very closely with other state agencies. We raise awareness of our population of the risks and consequences of modern risks and threats with regard to human trafficking with the use of modern ICT. International conferences have become a very important source of obtaining information, of learning from international experience that we will be adapting back home in Kazakhstan. Who are the victims of human trafficking? The people who are already victims through the recruitment through ICT. Mostly these are women. The experience of our organizations and my colleagues here today have shown that cyberspace is used very often to recruit victims. They target young women and girls who are in a vulnerable situation and who are having hardships in their times. They are contacted. They try to so-called marry them off. And we talked about this 15 years ago. Now, using new information technologies, this has taken on a new threatening form. The scope and the size and the frequency of the crimes has grown. Now, NGOs in Kazakhstan are trying to cope with these terrible consequences and aftermath, and it's very difficult for them to work. Why are they facing these difficulties today? Information and communication technologies are not just safe and intelligent internet sites. These are also methods and forms that quite often are very destructive because they have long-lasting psychological and physical harm on victims. Here, of course, in our work, we need to, first of all, focus on learning from others' experience, on building capacity, interagency cooperation, and providing specialized social services to the victims of human trafficking. We must be able to provide efficient assistance and to quickly bring victims back to normal life. The Republic of Kazakhstan, as it was said yesterday, is a country of destination and transit. This means that there are increased threats for migrants from neighboring states who become exploited and fall into slavery because they follow the paths of migrants. As a transit state, migrants who come from neighboring states who are trying to get to the Russian Federation or some other neighboring country, they can be recruited on the way and then just stay in Kazakhstan and be quite vulnerable, and they risk becoming victims of human trafficking. Who are these people who are men? These are migrants, internal migrants. In other words, people who do not go beyond the country of Kazakhstan. I'm finishing. I just wanted to say, of course, one of the most vulnerable groups of people are children and who use the internet services. We already talked about this today in practice. In the past 2-3 years, we have come to such ideas as cyberbullying. In other words, it is bullying that targets children 24 hours a day. And of course, the child becomes basically captive to this type cyberbullying. Children can't deal with these situations because they may be threatened, and they may then try to meet people who they meet on the internet, and that could be a very serious threat to the child. Of course, we need to elaborate alternative websites, and the initiators of this must be youth themselves, because it's the youth themselves that need to talk about safety on the internet and protect themselves. One very informative instrument is to identify people who have become victims. And this is the hotline that we have in Kazakhstan since 2009 at the initiative of the Ministry of the Interior. I would like to very much thank the OSCE for the multi-year investment in combating human trafficking, and by focusing the attention on the use of ICT in combating cybercrime, including against human trafficking. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, and I sincerely wish that we had more time for everyone, but we have these constraints, and we will, with that, turn to our last intervention from Tech Tackles Trafficking, and we will then move to panel 4.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good afternoon, distinguished guests, and let me first offer an enormous thanks to the OSCE for organizing this very important and timely event. We at Tech Tackles Trafficking are grateful for the opportunity today to join leading innovators, governments, NGOs, and businesses in discussing how we can end human trafficking in our time. Tech Tackles Trafficking is a multi-sector initiative between the private, public, and civil societies, including the McCain Institute, Stop the Traffic, Princess Eugenie's Anti-Slavery Collective, and the Independent Anti-Slavery Commission of the United Kingdom, to bring together non-traditional actors to leverage the full spectrum of each organization's unique capabilities in the fight against the enormous and global problem of human trafficking. Tech Tackles Trafficking aims to establish solutions for gaps that we can address in the here and now, while building a vision for strategic improvements to make enduring change that is both measurable and meaningful for victims, survivors, as well as practitioners working to intervene on their behalf. Thus far, we've held a number of panel events in London looking at drawing opinions and feedback from individuals who are in the fight against trafficking now, both at the strategic level and at the front lines, to generate new ideas and improvements to existing technological tools in order to sharpen and scale their effect in the fight that we all are in together. Now, we are working to convert those ideas into action. Presently, we are preparing the launch of our SHIELD initiative. Powered by 4IQ and built in consultation with our public and private sector partners, it is enriched by Stop the Traffic's Traffic Analysis Hub. Our initiative at its core aims to build capacity and enhance capability in the investigations of criminal networks engaged in human trafficking while maintaining an active feedback loop with our practitioner partners. This collaboration, coupled with our data lake of more than 14 trillion online markers, collected from breached and leaked data from open sources in the surface, deep, and dark webs, seeks to unmask the identities of bad actors on the web in order to identify points of intervention for our law enforcement and private sector partners. This will enable us to get at disrupting and ultimately defeating the $99 billion that contributes to trafficking in persons. As Princess Eugenie and Commissioner Richey mentioned, we at Tech Tackles Trafficking believe deeply in the use of conversation and cooperation to guide and develop the scalable technological tools that we need to lead the advance guard of the fight against human trafficking. We also believe that this is only possible if we do this together, and we would be eager to work alongside everyone in this room and any organization that wants to work with us in this effort. Thank you again for your time, and we look forward to what we can accomplish together.
Thank you very much, and thank you to all of the persons who intervened. We will also have another opportunity at the end of panel 4 for interventions. So once again, please contact Sasha behind me if you would like to speak after panel 4. And with that, we're going to turn to panel 4, which is titled Changing the Policy Landscape current and future strategic approaches to technology and human trafficking. Previous panels have focused on operational or practical work on the use of technology to fight human trafficking. Panel 1 addressed how technology is being misused. Panel 2 covered opportunities to use technology to prevent trafficking and protect victims. And Panel 3 addressed how technology can help with identification, investigation, and prosecution. This panel will bring those other topics together and will add to the policy discussion and consider how states could strategically advance the fight against human trafficking by adopting good laws and regulations, the challenges of policy action, and what partnerships should be advanced in order to optimize the anti-trafficking response. This panel will try to take stock of current policies enacted by different OSCE participating states, which will give us a better understanding about the policy landscape and existing shortcomings. Today's discussion will focus on different practices with a view toward promising approaches and harmonization across countries. As part of this discussion, we will also hear some thoughts on how to measure policy action and impact, a crucial piece of the puzzle. Moreover, policies impact not only human traffickers and victims, but a whole range of stakeholders, including NGOs and private sector companies. It's important to think about possible unintended consequences and how to minimize risk of policy failure, as well as how to build policy that works across different sectors of society. This is why we will conclude with some important insight into multi-sector partnerships that really lie at the heart of our efforts. We will begin with our first speaker, Ms. Petya Nestorova, who has been responsible for the Council of Europe's activities in the area of combating trafficking in human beings since 2010. She is the Executive Secretary of the Secretariat of the Council of Europe Convention on Action Against Trafficking in Human Beings, which has 47 state parties together with the group of experts on action against trafficking in human beings, also known as GRETA, which monitors compliance with the convention. Ms. Nestorova participates in evaluation visits, preparation of reports, and activities to support implementation of GRETA's recommendations. She holds a doctorate from the University of Sussex, as well as master's degrees in international economic relations and comparative European studies. And I should also add, is a very, very strong partner with the OSCE, and we very much value our partnership with the Council of Europe. Ms. Nestorova will speak about the policies enacted by the Council of Europe member states related to the use of technology to fight trafficking. Madam, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Val. I'm delighted and honored to speak at today's conference dedicated to such a topical issue in the fight against human trafficking, how to turn the use of technology from a liability to an asset. And I'm also very happy to be contributing to the gender balance, because Val earlier today said that one of the aims was to have, as many female speakers as possible. And I would like to thank, of course, the organizers for making it possible for all of us to be here at such a rich, thought-provoking event, which brings together so much expertise and knowledge. The organization that I represent, the Council of Europe, is celebrating its 17th anniversary this year. 70 years of working for 47 member states, all of which are, of course, OSCE participating states, in order to build and reinforce standards and tools around three pillars: human rights, rule of law, and democracy. In the area of action against human trafficking, the Council of Europe has been active in particular around the convention that it developed, and it has been enforced now for just over 10 years. A convention on action against human trafficking, which at the moment has 47 state parties, and it provides a comprehensive, holistic framework for addressing human trafficking, encompassing prevention, protection of victims, prosecution, as well as partnerships, both internationally and with civil society. In my presentation, I will first of all provide an overview of the work of the Council of Europe around the intersection between information and communication technology and human trafficking. Secondly, I will introduce recent policy developments in the Council of Europe, which are relevant to the topic of this conference. And finally, I will draw some recommendations on developing policies which address ICT-facilitated or enabled human trafficking. Back in 2007, the Council of Europe commissioned a study on the misuse of the internet for the recruitment of victims. Since then, the rapidly increasing availability of technology and generalized access to the internet have significantly changed the landscape. The drafters of the Council of Europe Convention, however, foresaw the use of new information technologies by traffickers and decided that the Convention's definition of trafficking in human beings covers trafficking involving use of such technologies. This is actually stressed in the explanatory report of the Convention, which in paragraph 79 indicates that the definition's reference to recruitment covers recruitment by any means, including via the internet, regardless of the mode employed. Therefore, the drafters of the Convention considered it unnecessary to add a further provision in the Convention which makes the Council of Europe Cybercrime Convention applicable to trafficking in human beings. Now, here I will say a few words about this particular convention on cybercrime, which is also known as the Budapest Convention. It has been enforced since 2004, and at the moment it has 63 state parties, including 19 countries beyond Europe, because it is open for any country around the world. And it is the first and so far only binding international instrument on crimes committed via the internet and other computer networks. The Cybercrime Convention deals particularly with infringements of computer-related fraud, copyright, child pornography, as it is called, although now we call it sexual abuse, image abuse, and violations of network security. So it does not specifically refer to trafficking in human beings, but on the other hand, all the procedural powers and tools that it contains can and should be regarded as covering all crimes committed on or via the internet, such as the search of computer networks, interception and seizure of computer stored data, as well as international cooperation provisions related to any criminal offense. The Cybercrime Convention covers both public and private networks and communication systems, which is of considerable importance since many seemingly public networks may be fakes or imitations of public networks or services. Just to refer to some of its important provisions which are relevant to the fight against human trafficking, in Article 17, it is provided for the expedited preservation of stored computer data. Article 19 is about search and seizure of stored computer data, and then Article 20 is about real-time collection of traffic data. In the absence of a global agreement on cybercrime, the Council of Europe Cybercrime Convention and the work related to it, such as the Octopus Community, which is a platform for information sharing and cooperation on cybercrime and electronic evidence, as well as the GLACY project on global action on cybercrime, provide avenues for close international cooperation in a world connected by global computer networks. The Cybercrime Program Office of the Council of Europe in Bucharest is expanding its programs of cooperation to strengthen the criminal justice capacities in some 120 countries worldwide. Recently, a new project was launched called iProceeds, which is about targeting cybercrime proceeds. Last year, the Cybercrime Convention Committee published a mapping study on cyber violence. The study highlighted amongst the challenges to the investigation and prosecution of cyber violence, the fact that victims have no information on available remedies and receive limited help by the law enforcement. It also noted that children might be better protected than adults because child exploitation statutes may be usable to cover cyber violence against children. The study falls short of making recommendations covering, in particular, the linkages between cybercrime and human trafficking. However, it is noteworthy that it refers to some case law, for example, a case from the Philippines from 2017, in which a man was sent to a lifetime in prison for multiple counts of human trafficking, cybercrime, and rape. He was actually using his housemate for online sexual abuse. The Council of Europe's group of experts on action against human trafficking, GRETA, which monitors the implementation of the Council of Europe Anti-Trafficking Convention, has included in its second round evaluation reports information on investigation of human trafficking offenses committed through the internet. And you can read in these reports that there are quite a lot of challenges around the fact that there are limited resources of specialized human trafficking units. There are challenges linked to the shifting priorities. It is not always so easy as it should be in real life to ensure that human trafficking specialized police units closely collaborate with cybercrime and financial investigation units. And as I said, there are new priorities around terrorism, smuggling, which shift attention and resources. Practically all the countries monitored by Greta have reported an increased use of the internet and mobile phones for recruiting and controlling victims of trafficking. There are challenges linked to collecting evidence, but despite that, there are some examples of successfully prosecuted cases. For example, a case linked to online sexual abuse from Norway, Bergen. At the same time, there are significant variations between countries as regards national legislation in the area of telecommunications and the internet, as well as the capacity to detect and respond rapidly to computer-related crimes. A couple of years ago, the Council of Europe commissioned a study on blocking, filtering, and takedown of illegal internet content in the 47 member states. It was prepared by the Swiss Institute of Comparative Law. And it actually mapped the different regimes across Europe. And it's interesting to see to what extent there are still differences. I'm not going to go in detail because of my limited time. I just wanted to highlight this interesting piece of work. Now, as regards recent policy developments at the Council of Europe, in March 2016, the organization adopted its first internet governance strategy, and now it is currently working on a new digital governance strategy, which will span from next year to 2023. It is an opportunity to address the interaction between ICT and human trafficking. The Council of Europe has also been developing cooperation with the private sector in order to promote safe internet, where human rights, democracy, and the rule of law are respected in an online environment. Following multilateral consultations, the Secretary General of the Council of Europe has signed an agreement with representatives of leading technology firms and associations. It gives internet companies a recognized status in the Council of Europe, which in turn enables them to sit side by side with governments in the shaping of internet policy. The companies and associations include, I'm just giving examples, Apple, Deutsche Telekom, Facebook, Google, Microsoft, Orange, Computer and Communications Industry Association, Digital Europe, the European Digital SME Alliance, etc. Further, last year, the Committee of Ministers of the Council of Europe adopted a recommendation on the roles of responsibilities of internet intermediaries, which provides guidelines to member states when devising and implementing legislative frameworks relating to internet intermediaries. And all this, I must stress, has to be in line with the relevant Council of Europe conventions, the Convention on Protection of Human Rights, the Data Protection Convention, etc. I would just want to highlight one of the provisions of these guidelines on content moderation. I will quote, "In cases where content is restricted by intermediaries in line with their own content restriction policies because it contains an indication of a serious crime, restrictions should be accompanied by adequate measures to ensure that evidence is retained for effective criminal law investigations. If intermediaries have specific knowledge of such restricted content, they should report this to a law enforcement authority without undue delay." Finally, I will move to my final part of the presentation, which is about recommendations. And here, of course, it's very challenging to be on the last panel because we have heard for so many other speakers and so many recommendations have already been made. At national level, the lack of appropriate legislation and state policies creates problems of prosecution and jurisdiction. At the same time, at the international level, other than the Council of Europe Cybercrime Convention and EU legislation on electronic communications and the responsibility of internet service providers, there is a lack of instruments on the use of internet and internet-related crimes. According to Europol, the rapid evolution of cyber threats has led to a situation in which certain conduct is criminalized in some countries but not in others. An example is the live streaming of child sexual abuse. Within the EU, there are countries where the act of live streaming is not separately criminalized, while at the same time it cannot be captured under possession. Similarly, willful facilitation of the hosting of illicit content is not criminalized in a number of countries, effectively creating a safe haven for bulletproof hosters. So it is essential to harmonize legislation related to cyber trafficking, as it is referred to in some literature, such as on the blocking, filtering, and takedown of illicit content, including the possibility of withdrawal of data protection in the case of human trafficking investigations. Another point already made is the need for capacity building on cybercrime and electronic evidence, ranging from training of judges, prosecutors, investigators, setting up of specialized units, and enabling cooperation at all levels. Regular monitoring, analysis, and research was already mentioned. Analysis of reported cases can help develop preventive action to alert potential victims as well as to alert clients. And we need to strengthen general awareness raising of the risks and manifestations of cyber trafficking. It is also necessary to make mutual legal assistance more efficient and to address the problem of evidence on the cloud, that is in foreign, multiple, or unknown locations, as well as the related issues of jurisdiction and loss of knowledge of location. At the same time, self-regulation is not enough. As there is little oversight over enforcement of self-commitments and insufficient predictability, which is why the Council of Europe is increasingly calling for clear regulatory frameworks where states do not oblige platforms to cooperate voluntarily, but set clear boundaries. Finally, I agree with all those who said that, and I will use a different word actually, I will go to the old Greek word panacea, because you were talking about silver bullets. Technology cannot be a panacea in this respect, but this conference really has provided us with a lot of insight into the opportunities as well as challenges and risks. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Petya. Your call for urgently addressing evidence retention, including across jurisdictions, and your point that safe havens are really unacceptable is well taken, as well as the recommendation for harmonization. I think these are excellent guidance for participating states. We will now turn to our second speaker, Ms. Halla Gunnarsdóttir, is Special Advisor to the Icelandic government with focus on gender equality. She is a founding member and former head of policy and partnerships of the Women's Equality Party. Previously, Halla served as the political advisor to the Minister of Interior in Iceland, and prior to that, she was the parliamentary reporter for Morgunblaðið Daily. Halla has a BE in education and a master's in international relations, and she will speak about policy considerations and challenges related to technology and trafficking from the perspective of one of our participating states. Ma'am, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you, first of all, for inviting me to take part in this conference. It's been very informative and an extremely important conversation. In my contribution, I will focus more on sexual exploitation than on labor exploitation, mainly because my expertise is in violence against women and girls and gender equality. And I'm going to start by addressing some of the challenges that I have encountered as a policymaker in this area. And then I'll discuss some of the policy proposals that I think might help us move forward. So if we start with the challenges, as we've discussed today and yesterday, our policies are usually national or regional, but the challenges are global, and the internet is global. And I mean, cross-border organized crime is not a recent phenomenon, but the new technologies have changed the nature of it, or the face of it, and sometimes also the nature of it. Technology has also created new forms of violence against women, which is a contributing factor to sexual exploitation. But any attempt to regulate the internet or discuss regulation on content on the internet is also heavily contested. In 2012, I served as the political advisor to the Minister of the Interior in Iceland. And in that capacity, I led a consultation into the harms of violent pornography in Iceland. And this consultation was initiated in a response to concerns raised by numerous experts about the effects of violent online pornography on the nature and possibly the scope of sexual violence in Iceland. This included experts from the Children's House, and these are examples that have never left my mind since I first learned about them, who shared information on cases where young boys had replicated violent pornography, testing out what they had seen online on their sisters or nieces or neighbors. And this consultation that we initiated led to suggestions on improved education and prevention and a better healthcare response to the harms of pornography. But the suggestion that caught most attention in Iceland and internationally was the proposal to open up a conversation on potential ways to limit the porn industry's access to children. And the public debate became very polarized very quickly. Our local public debate in Iceland became a global debate, and that's because the local challenges that we had identified, they were a result of an international reality. But the solutions that we were able to work towards were regional. So we were only able to work towards solutions within the borders of Iceland. And I'm mentioning this in the context of the challenge that our policies are national, while the challenges that we deal with are global. And that brings me to the other challenge, which I refer to as computer says no. In the response to the question on what could be done to prevent children from being exposed to violent pornography, there was a lot of tech experts, maybe some of them were just self-claimed tech experts, but who spoke out publicly and answered nothing. It's technically impossible to do anything. But as I kept digging into their arguments, and I did not have a tech background, so that's not where I came from into this conversation, I realized that they were in fact saying it is politically impossible. And that's a perfectly acceptable opinion to have as a political opinion. And this is a familiar theme. A few years back, I worked for a London-based international law firm, McAllister Olivarius, which specializes in online abuse and including so-called revenge pornography or image-based sex abuse. And there is a terrifying crowdsourcing element to such abuse, where internet users work collaboratively towards the widest circulation of the images. And this has included crowd action to make sure revenge porn images popped up in search engine results. So if you were a victim of revenge porn and someone would type your name into Google because you were applying for a job or you had met someone new, then this is what would pop up. And at that time, multiple conversations with search engine operators had not led to any positive results. The resistance to engage with content is understandable for many reasons. Don't get me wrong, I understand that. But I think revenge porn is one example of why a strict policy in that direction doesn't work out. And as it turned out, computer didn't say no, people said no. And this has changed. Today, victims of revenge porn have tools to demand the takedown of search engine results that publicize the abuse they've suffered. And overall, there is much more awareness of the urgent need to discuss content and that protection of the medium does not equal protection of the message. And the third challenge I wanted to mention, and has actually been touched upon here today and yesterday, is that policymakers and law enforcement, we tend to be one step behind technology at each time. Legislation and law enforcement struggle to keep up with new technologies and new spaces and new norms that are created by tech. The difficulties in defining internet platforms is one example. And the platform's desire to be merely communication enablers is increasingly challenged. But most national legislators are having difficulties challenging the various platforms that may enable illegal activity. I would also add that tech companies also have a history of being a little bit too slow in responding to societal challenges that they have created. And this brings me to the fourth point. I wanted to mention corporate interests. From service providers to platforms and Facebook to Pornhub, Uber to Amazon, the internet and more broadly new tech is full of large corporate interests. And against these interests, public policymakers will often struggle, as we have many examples of. Excuse me. And these struggles, they multiply when we're speaking from the perspective of small governments and small countries. So we need to analyze these interests and ensure public policy works for the public, not just the few. And I agree with Petya and Nestorova that self-regulation is important, but it's very limited. And I know that many companies have done a remarkable job on this front, and we've got many of them represented here today. But we can also hear that the tech companies are starting to call for regulation themselves. They're telling us, we don't know what you want us to do. And I think we need to listen to that, and we need to respond to it. Because even though the new tech-based businesses have created new challenges, they didn't create the crime or the people who use the new technology. So it isn't up to them alone to solve these problems. We need to do that in collaboration. So where do we head from here? As we've heard from multiple speakers, our new technologies have also created new solutions. And having worked with police and other content examiners, I am very intrigued by the technologies that can help detect and take down child sexual abuse images. And this could maybe be applied to other forms of sexual abuse as well, such as revenge porn, and maybe also pornographic material that is produced throughout forced prostitution, as Melanie Thompson told us about yesterday. And it is in this context that we may need to move beyond the traditional criminal burden of proof criteria and acknowledge that even though there's not enough evidence to put a certain perpetrator behind the bars, there may be enough evidence to stop the circulation of content that has been made in exploitative circumstances. The stay-down technologies are also massively important to stop the circulation of image-based abuse. And I also wonder if artificial intelligence could be better utilized to interrupt the demand for abusive and illegal material. If we look at child sexual exploitation, we know a great deal about the path to becoming a user of such material. It rarely starts there, it starts somewhere else. So how can we use technology to interrupt that path? And I think we learned about some very interesting initiatives from Seattle, and I wonder if they could be expanded. And if more of us could adopt similar technologies. Could algorithms detect advertisements that is likely to be posted for the purpose of grooming people into exploitative work or into prostitution? And as most of you are following closely the development of blockchain to contest modern slavery, we know there's a massive potential on that front. And I also believe there might be more potential to Interpol's baseline. But I still agree with Ambassador John Richmond, who spoke yesterday, that the need should drive the technical solutions, not the other way around. Our challenges will not be solved with artificial intelligence only and not by algorithms only. We cannot code ourselves out of all the problems. We need solid public policies, national, regional, and global, that underpin the potential technological solutions. And I wanted to mention one example. Earlier this decade, Iceland moved to expand the definition of all online child sexual abuse, or what's been referred to as child pornography, so that it would cover animated material as well as images, where potentially older actors pose or act as children. This has clear policy ramifications, as it means that image-based child sex abuse is not only considered a threat to the victims, but to children in general. Policies like this might enable better technical solutions, as the illegality of the material would not depend on any sort of age identification of the people involved. Similarly, while the porn industry claims that one of its most popular genres and most long-standing genres, teen, only applies to 18 and 19-year-olds, it can be hard to ratify the age of people involved who may look much younger. The normalization of teen porn may also encourage the sexual exploitation of children. So maybe there are some policy areas to explore in this context. Could new definitions help us get a better control of the problem? I also wanted to mention age verification, and I think the intention behind the UK legislation, even though it's been off to a rocky start, are quite interesting, and that we also should follow the development of UK's most recent white paper, which was published yesterday. It's very easy to criticize the pioneers in this area, but what if more of us instead joined them in finding ways for all of this to work? Dear guests, today and yesterday we've learned of many tools that can help us take the next steps in combating human trafficking and other forms of labor exploitation. I wanted to mention lastly, and I'm sorry Val, I wanted to mention the demand in terms of public policies tackling the demand. Iceland has adopted the so-called Nordic model, previously Swedish model, on prostitution, decriminalizing those who sell sex while criminalizing the demand and the third parties. And while no policy is perfect, I still believe that this is the best policy we have. And I think it also recognizes the link between commercial sex and sexual exploitation, as Melanie Thompson described very well yesterday, and others have done so too. We need to continue developing our international collaboration. I'm delighted to be a part of this conversation, and I look forward to the continuing of it. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Halla. Your discussion of the realities of policy adoption is really fascinating, and it highlights the fact that our biggest challenge might not be a tech problem. It might be a human problem, and that's something certainly to consider. With that, we'll turn to our third speaker. Mr. David Mancini is a public prosecutor at the Anti-Mafia Directorate in L'Aquila, Italy. He has more than 20 years of experience in investigating and prosecuting organized crime offenses, with a special focus on human trafficking. He's advanced the Teramo Protocol, a good practice on identification and protection of victims, and trained judges and prosecutors, and served as a consultant for the Italian Department of Equal Opportunities and many other public institutions. He today will discuss the intersection of trafficking and technology laws from a practitioner's perspective. David, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Val. Excellencies, dear guests, participants, colleagues. I go straight to the points because the time is very short. New technologies are a common language in the most serious form of organized crime. And we all agree that trafficking is a serious crime. We don't need to spend more words on that. Criminal networks use the internet and social networking tools to recruit victims to be exploited as a marketing platform for prostitution, labor exploitation, including domestic servitude, pornography, misuse of live web cameras, live distant child sexual abuse, and many other services are online. The use of encryption technologies raises difficulties for the investigative authorities. Research and investigation on the phenomena in Italy shows that in mixed migration flows, the line between smuggling and trafficking is very, very blurred if we look through the lens of ICT. Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, there are pages, group profiles dedicated to the advertisement of any kind of illegal service, to purchase every service offering ID documents, visas, jobs, accommodation, everything. Some of these pages count hundreds of thousands of members and followers. Some groups are public, others are closed or private. It is present, this phenomenon, on the visible web and on the dark web. Private groups' systems on Telegram are even more encrypted and hidden, and they are also particularly used by terrorist groups. So the use of ICT tools is more and more common among minors. Many websites and posts offer sex-related services. In some cases, these sexual services are hidden behind other activities apparently legal. It is a huge flow of online offers. This use of the web fits into the folds of national policies regarding prostitution, making free prostitution appears what in reality hides situations of exploitation. A national and international policy effort is required to reduce this gray area, not only looking at the supply chain, but coordinating actions to reduce the demand of exploited services. In Italy, identification, assistance, protection of trafficking victims is a priority. The National Action Plan remarked the need to a multi-agency and victim-centered approach in combating trafficking. The proactive use of new technologies at a social and investigative level allows to obtain good results if everything is organized with a multi-professional method. From the social sector, Italian NGOs have been using ICT to facilitate contacts with people at risk of trafficking. A fundamental tool is the anti-trafficking toll-free number set up by the Department for Equal Opportunities as part of action in favor of victims. Anybody can turn to it. A part of its own pages in all social networks, an app has been created to be published in the Play Store catalog of Android devices. Android platform is the one used mostly by trafficked or exploited persons. That tool allows victims to contact directly the hotline with all the information, the assistance provided there. And also for the common citizens, there is the opportunity for people who want to remain anonymous to contact through this app, the hotline number. And the use of ICT to improve victims' identification can bring added value if stakeholders are connected in networks and operate always with a multi-agency approach, sharing information with the same speed of traffickers. Multi-agency protocols and national referral mechanisms should be implemented, and providing standard operating procedures in which support of technology become crucial. In the digital age, a new investigative horizon for trafficking as a serious crime is represented by the computer intrusion or by interception through an internet device. Traffickers manage almost all their traffic via encrypted communication systems. ICT is a covered working tool to recruit, transfer, manage, exploit victims, and to exchange money. Then it is more powerful as the criminal capacity of the organization grows and get the typical structure of mafia organized crime. Digital investigation have become a need to keep pace with traffickers. A computer spyware is a software inserted inside the operating system of any digital device, able to take possession of that system, to control the audio, thus making a classic wiretapping, but also being able to localize and tracking the person or collecting any type of information related. This is from the perspective of prosecutor, because of course there are the technicians more expert than, more able than me to explain. Through this system, the features are wiretapping and call recording, environmental recording, remote camera and remote video, access to data, playback and viewing of images, videos, localization, information about the applications, internet history, keylogger, program activities, file activity, login and logout activities, and other functions. Italian law enforcement agencies are using hacking tools in the process of criminal investigations. It is a modern way to face traffickers in a comprehensive approach. Hacking investigations are part of a proactive approach, is not a panacea, as was said. For example, directly linked to financial investigations to get codes, bank account, home banking operation, or other encrypted information on money transfer and laundering. It is something to be handled with care. The Constitution protects fundamental rights such as privacy, inviolability of the domicile, and freedom and confidentiality of communication. To deal with these fundamental rights, the higher chamber of the Italian Supreme Court established that the use of hacking tools is permitted for wiretapping, but when it is not possible for the location to be identified individually, and when criminal activities have not been committed, the use of hacking tools is permitted only for criminal proceedings on organized crime, and so for trafficking, and terrorism. This decision aims to strike a balance between the significant benefits brought by those tools in terms of investigative efficiency and their increasing invasiveness. A law was also approved in Italy in 2017. But you know, it's not only an Italian practice. Many other countries are working on that. Germany, Netherlands, France, UK, others. Each one with peculiarities and different approaches according to their national legislation and constitution. But let's say it's not possible to proceed in random order, because investigations against traffickers are often transnational and require cooperation. The proper balance between effectiveness of investigations and protection of privacy should be material for new international tools in order to prevent such delicate processes from being managed without uniform and transparent procedures or by delegating external hacking agencies instead of official law enforcement agencies. We need guarantees of integrity and transparency of law enforcement hacking systems and procedures. Should international rules and conventions set common frameworks, it would be a benefit on fighting against organized crime and trafficking. International harmonization is needed. New conventions are strongly needed with the active engagement of the main ICT companies. They have a big responsibility. They collect massive amount of data, and they are a kind of new prophets in this digital age. So not self-regulated instruments, but cooperation with an international harmonization, also in view of the functionality for the judicial cooperation, the effectiveness of the mutual legal assistance, the efficiency of the joint investigation teams must be guaranteed through a modern legal framework on ICT investigation related to the types of investigation available and to the rules to get evidences valid for the trials. States must seek common solutions, including those in balancing with the fundamental rules of the European Charter of Fundamental Rights and with the European Court of Human Rights. This necessitates a real priority with reference with the European investigative order, which expressly regulates the relations between the judicial authorities of the member states in case of wiretapping, involving targets and operators located in the territories of more than one state, and which provides already now for specific obligation of mutual communication and authorization. In conclusion, regarding human resources, professionals must be trained on these new frontiers, always with a multi-agency and human rights-centered approach. That's why ICT investigations have been also included in the live simulation training held in the last 3 years under the direction of the Office of Special Representative for Combating Trafficking of Human Beings. Just 10 seconds, days ago, I was interrogating a former trafficker, member of a criminal organization who is now cooperating with the prosecutor's office. In thinking of this conference, I solicited him. I already knew the answer, but I asked him, how important is the web for you when you were a trafficker? And he answered, go inside that, the smartphone, and you'll get what you want: victims, money, corruption, criminal members. The web is their weapon, so I'd say let's convert that weapon to our favor. Thank you.
Thank you very much, David, and for your discussion of the connection between laws at the national level and your work on a case-by-case basis, your highlighting of the concerns of privacy, and of course your call for need for international legal instruments and harmonization. Very, very important recommendations for us to consider. We will now turn to our next speaker, who is Chris White, principal researcher and partner at Microsoft. His team develops software for data analysis focusing on the intersection of artificial intelligence and business intelligence. Before joining Microsoft, Chris was a program manager at the Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency, or DARPA, where he created and managed DARPA's leading programs, XData, MEMEX, and the Open Catalog. In recognition of this work, Chris received the 2016 Presidential Award for extraordinary efforts to combat trafficking in persons. He earned his PhD from Johns Hopkins University in electrical engineering, where his research focused on machine learning, statistical methods for large data sets, and human language technology. Chris will speak on how to approach the topic of technology and trafficking as a technologist and a data specialist, and what opportunities exist to combine data and policy. Chris, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Val, and for the OSCE for the invitation. First, I'm not on the front line. Technology is abstract and away from the physical and emotional issues encountered by law enforcement, victim services, and victims themselves. As Melanie Thompson said, I will never understand her experience, but I can be informed and act. What you see here on the slide is the Babbage Difference Engine. It's the first computer, since we're talking about technology, from the 1820s. Although it's old, we're still doing the same fundamental operation of comparison, only now we want to compare policies and their outcomes. As we've heard, this is a complex issue, and today we'll focus on one area, online advertisements in English for commercial sex in internet-connected environments. Data and technology enables more successful case-based law enforcement against human trafficking. Connecting data enables more cases and bigger cases. It also shows a limitation in scale for case-based methods. Case-based methods do not scale with the size and speed of the problem. They are reactionary. They scale with the workforce and the geography of the caseworkers and officials. For example, technology has enabled law enforcement to prioritize bigger cases. This recent indictment from Oregon in the United States broke an international trafficking ring, including participants in 3 countries, 12 cities, 500 websites, multiple businesses, and the rescue of 5 victims. It stemmed from the discovery of online content from tools related to the US government's investment in anti-trafficking technology. This scale, this level of organized activity, the number of businesses, the existence of racketeering, shows promise for tech to aid, as Ambassador Richmond has said, in helping investigators on where to investigate. However, it is not automatic, and it took multiple years. Also, technology has enabled law enforcement to process more cases, many more cases. But the anti-human trafficking community, this community has a scale problem. This illustration, Seattle, 2016. Washington State was the first state in the US to adopt an anti-trafficking law. Between 2012 and 2016, OSCE acting coordinator Valiant Richey worked hard as a prosecutor to progress from about 30 cases a year to almost 90. But they stopped counting cases and started measuring the scale. They identified over 110 websites offering commercial sex services. One of those sites averaged over 30,000 ads a month. Many technology innovations have targeted the problem of human trafficking, some with significant success. For example, similar innovations to Washington State connecting data and sex trafficking have helped New York County progress from 30 to 300 cases a year, and importantly, referring prostitution arrests to trafficking cases from less than 1% to more than 60%. For the victims involved, each case may be the most important issue of their lives. The success, though, in these case-based methods also highlights the problems of scale, including the number of investigators, the amount of evidence, the number of locations, the number of people and businesses involved. Technology helps discover and connect data, but the people do investigations. Despite this rapid and substantial progress in prosecution of human trafficking cases, the speed and scale of the problem operates at another level. Here you see that in 2016, there were over 5 million commercial sex advertisements in 11 US cities, with more than 300,000 in New York and Seattle. Not all of these advertisements are real. Not all are trafficking related, which adds complexity to the investigation. The staff of these organizations cannot possibly be expected to respond to this scale. So innovation can and must come through a market-based approach with policy action in complement to a case-based approach with law enforcement action. The US SESTA-FOSTA law illustrates how that might work as an example of policy on platforms to be accountable for their content. GDPR illustrates how policy originating in one place can become global. While one could debate the theoretical successes and impact of these policies, continual measurement and evaluation with data and technology can provide new information. Whether SESTA-FOSTA is the right policy or not is not the issue here. Our argument is that it and other policies can be tech-informed during creation and can be measured with data and technology to ensure intended outcomes. And so what makes a method market-based? It's approaching the problem through the lens of economics, supply, demand, price, competition. Importantly, policies can be measured and evaluated by similar and complementary technology to case-based methods. As Ambassador Richmond has mentioned, it's about measurement. Supply. What you're looking at, the technology can measure policy effects. What you're looking at is a map and a timeline. We are looking at the landscape of commercial sex advertisements in 2018. The larger the circle, the more ads. Look at the color intensity as we pass through March and April with the passage of SESTA. It goes much darker, not gone, but decimated. The same can be true of price. Technology can measure policy effects on a market through the lens of price. From a market-oriented view, given SESTA, it's now more difficult to communicate supply of available people for sex with higher risks of negative consequences to the platform provider. What happens? Prices increase. See the timeline showing normalized price in 2018. Approaching SESTA in March and April, prices declining, indicating supply and lack of fear for publishing commercial sex advertisements. Post-SESTA, see the price start to creep up, and then up, and then up. From January to March, compared to June to August, the average price of a service rose more than 15%. Consider the impact to any industry if the price goes up that much, whether it's opioids or bread. But the story evolves and becomes nuanced. Adversarial reactions show the need for continued evaluation. As the market reacts to destabilization, some see an opportunity for growing business by taking more risk as a platform provider or a service provider to fill the vacuum. Here we see a timeline for 2018 showing the drop in advertisements after SESTA FOSTA and the takedown of Backpage.com. But then the number of advertisements begins to rise again. What we see is copycat pages, pages evading search engine indexing prioritization by removing dates, pages reacting to US jurisdiction. There is a need for monitoring and evaluation. Was this the intended effect? If we knew these reactions, would the policy be different? There's a need for a combination of scarce expertise and involvement of platform companies. How do you imagine technology capability? Where do you learn about it? How could it be used to evaluate and change policy? Therefore, to enable innovation, we can consider strategic policy that is tech-informed and designed for measurement and evaluation. The work happening in New York shows that the same technology investment to process cases using information on the internet can be repurposed to measure the market, to measure the macro issues. Most importantly, we see that from SESTA FOSTA, public policy can affect trafficking. Technology and data analysis have additional purpose beyond case management to evaluate policy outcomes and provide feedback for updated policy modifications. If you've heard anything today, you should realize that we must approach this problem at the speed and scale it occurs if we are to have any chance of ending trafficking. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Chris. Your discussion of does policy matter, and I think it's a resounding yes, but we have to measure it. And your advocation for a market-based approach is well taken, especially when you highlight the limitations of the case-based approach. Thank you very much. With that, we'll turn to our final speaker on this panel. Eric Anderson leads the program to tackle modern slavery for British Telecom, or BT, one of the world's leading communication services companies operating in over 180 companies. He's also a co-founder of Tech Against Trafficking, a coalition of technology companies collaborating with global experts to help eradicate human trafficking using technology. With a stakeholder-centric and data-driven focus, Eric has championed the responsible and sustainable business transformation in BT over 10 years. Mr. Anderson will speak about why partnerships are relevant on the topic of technology and trafficking and the potential of those partnerships. Eric, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Val, and thank you to the dedicated team at the OSCE for hosting this critical discussion. I'd like you all to close your eyes for a moment and imagine that when you open them, you're working at a helpline for a national victim support organisation. You're at your desk, ready to answer the phone to someone's cry for help. A call comes in, and you pick it up and greet the caller, and you hear a distressed female voice respond. But you quickly realise that they are speaking a different language to you. The helpline's call system recognises this too, and your computer screen begins translating real-time what they're saying into text. It prompts you to play an automatic response to the caller's language, offering to bring a translator into the conversation. She declines, and you ask how you can help. And as she tries to explain her situation, your screen suggests, based on voice recognition, that this person calls herself Jenny, and she's rung the helpline 9 previous times. The case notes from those calls appear on your screen. Once you've confirmed this person is the same Jenny, you continue to listen and offer help, leveraging the knowledge in the case notes. 90 minutes pass by quickly, but during that time, the call case notes are writing themselves on your screen. As the conversation continues, you're able to fully focus on Jenny's immediate crisis, navigating the system prompts to select the next steps to put in motion with Jenny's consent. You're able to reassure Jenny that already people are being mobilized to help her. The law enforcement team local to Jenny's location has been identified and put on standby to support her. The police reviewed the case notes, so they knew a lot about Jenny. And Jenny found it comforting to know the first name of the police officer she'll be meeting. It's Karen. She conferenced into the call to speak to Jenny, to let her hear her voice. Karen gave Jenny confidence that she will be there to meet her shortly, and she wasn't in trouble. She was there to help her. Jenny's flight to freedom had begun. By this point, the police intelligence team were poring over the case notes for clues about her exploiters. Their system identified patterns in Jenny's account, which indicate an organised crime gang that they were aware of, but didn't know were operating on their patch. This shaped some of the key questions asked by Karen once Jenny had been taken to a local safe house. With the key questions asked, international connections were made, and by nightfall, suspects thousands of miles away, but local to Jenny's family, were taken into custody. The safe house support team had welcomed Jenny. She had a room and a bed to herself, and for the first time in a long time, she had the key to her bedroom door. Jenny's long road to recovery had begun. Now, as you sit at your desk, you know that Jenny is now one of many thousands of survivors across the country. The relevant data about her case will be working hard to bring justice not just for Jenny, but for the prevention of her ordeal happening to someone else. Data sets on survivors are no longer isolated from each other. Data on routes, methodologies, typologies are building each day, and they're used to inform a dynamic picture of human trafficking at a local, regional, national, and international level. Trends emerge, intelligence is gleaned, policies are fine-tuned. The data picture is one which all key frontline organisations are feeding into. They're all using this data to drive their response because they share a common understanding that to be truly effective, they need to know the who, what, where, when, how and why of human trafficking. As Jenny's long road to recovery begins, the systematic shutdown of human trafficking is drawing closer. Now, Jenny's story may be fictitious, but the technology to make it happen is not. These technologies exist, even if the precise solutions may not. They could be developed and put into practice, which raises the key question: why isn't this happening? What's stopping us? And how can we overcome these barriers? I think the answers to these questions are deceptively complex. Yet, at the heart of it, I'd argue that the challenge is simply one of strong partnerships, of collaboration and teamwork. Now, don't get me wrong, getting this right isn't easy. If it was, we'd have already done it by now. But its importance simply cannot be overstated. In Jenny's case, a successful response demands the smart use of technology to get the right information to the right people at the right time to do the right things. That cannot and does not happen consistently without strong partnerships. It's been my experience, working in the technology sector for over 20 years, that when the benefits of technology fail to be realized, it's mainly through the performance breakdown of human interfaces, not technology interfaces. As Ambassador Richmond stated so plainly in the opening remarks of this conference, collaboration is critical in applying technology to the fight against trafficking. And anyone attempting this should keep in mind the 5 considerations he laid out. As a technologist, I wholeheartedly endorse his words. I'd wager that all technologists present would admit that creating the technology solutions to help eradicate human trafficking, though challenging, and in some cases cutting edge, is not the really hard part of our task. The really hard part is creating and maintaining the right organizational conditions to successfully adopt these tech solutions so that they can be truly effective. Now, these conditions are what I'd like to explore next. I believe they hold the keys to unlocking the power of technology through strong organizational partnerships. The first condition is one of legislation for business transparency. Legislation that is fit for purpose on modern slavery should, of course, fully reflect the severity of the crime and enable sufficient powers to exercise control over it. But this isn't enough to pull the business community firmly into the fight. Legislation needs to demand transparency from businesses on the steps that they are taking to eradicate slavery. This is beginning to happen. Section 54 of the UK Modern Slavery Act and similar provisions within other more recent national legislation is to be applauded. And responsible businesses themselves are clapping the loudest. This isn't legislation we're resisting. We welcome it. It drives much needed awareness, pulling other businesses into a mindset of being part of the solution to slavery, not the problem. It helps create a level playing field for responsible businesses to differentiate themselves by doing the right thing. But to be effective, the legislation also needs to be enforced. If lack of transparency and lack of action remains unchallenged, it significantly undermines our progress. Government legislators and policymakers need to enhance and harmonise their impact by creating a common expectation wherever a business operates to respect human rights and stamp out slavery. Businesses want to focus their resources not on having to respond to different expectations across different jurisdictions, but on delivering positive impacts through their actions. Equally, the demand for transparency should be addressed by all organisations, not just businesses. We especially need to be able to hold state organisations to account. Their sway over society and through public procurement in particular has the potential to radically accelerate positive impact in supply chains. The commitments announced by some governments recently in September at the UN General Assembly are an encouraging step towards this. The second condition is around investment in technology and digital skills. We all need to invest more in the use of technology to eradicate trafficking. Frontline organisations supporting victims are having to make difficult decisions about where to place their focus to have the biggest impact. In their tightly contested budgets, the relatively high cost of tech has historically pushed it way down their list of priorities. Their digital skills and capabilities have suffered as a result. And many businesses, especially smaller businesses, are in a similar position. In stark contrast, as we heard from the panel yesterday, criminals are quick to adapt to exploit the misuse of technology. and we need to tip the scales back in our favour. Governments need to acknowledge and address the shocking imbalance of government funding of counter-trafficking efforts compared to their funding to disrupt other serious organised crime. And insufficient investment in building tech solutions and digital skills in the anti-trafficking sector simply means continuing with a subscale and piecemeal response. The lack of investment in anti-trafficking technologies across all groups in no way matches the ambitions that we should all have. We should be leveraging the best that tech can offer to stop the scourge of slavery. Jenny's story shouldn't be a fiction. The third condition is about alignment, and this is perhaps the trickiest of all three conditions to address. It's somewhat implicit already in the first two conditions. We need alignment on business transparency legislation. We need alignment between the investment in our anti-slavery efforts and the scale of the problem. Misalignment means continuing the status quo, and we can do better than that. But there's other characteristics of alignment that we still need to create the right conditions for strong partnership. We need alignment on how to work effectively as a team, and we need alignment on the management of relevant data. Alignment on how to work as a team is about recognizing our organizational strengths and weaknesses. It's about being humble enough to admit and share our challenges and seek solutions together. It's about checking our egos at the door and realizing our goals are not achieved unless we get there as a team. That a challenge for one of us is a challenge for all of us to respond to. Successful teams that achieve their goals recognize this. Teammates pitch in to help each other because they believe that success comes not just from the endeavors of individuals, but also due to their flexibility and commitment to work together. We need alignment on this mindset of teamwork. But in considering all groups involved in the anti-trafficking fight, teamwork has not been a mindset I've seen much evidence of. Perhaps it's because we often lack a unifying game plan when it comes to the use of technology. Even in the most committed of countries, such as the United Kingdom, we lack a national data and technology strategy to achieve this ambition. And finally, I come to the need for alignment on the management of relevant data. So let's go back to Jenny's story from earlier. Consider the data collected on her journey. Right now, this is limited, fragmented, and isolated. It's patchy and not joined up, and it's holding us back. Of course, we need to respect people's privacy and data security. Data collection and sharing must be proportional to the need, but we're currently hiding behind these important considerations, not grappling with them head-on. We should be challenging ourselves to squeeze more value out of the data we have. As a team, we need to get more aligned on how we manage this relevant data. We need to get it working for us more. What data do you have that could help in the fight against slavery? And when you've identified it, don't silo it. Share it in a way which respects privacy. Jenny's story illustrates a case-based approach. The market-based approach that Chris mentioned moments ago is also greatly enhanced by alignment on data management. So to summarize, I believe strong partnership is essential to realizing the benefits of technology in eradicating human trafficking. I believe the right conditions for strong partnerships to emerge and be successful are legislation on business transparency, coupled with investment and alignment across the anti-trafficking sector. But do I believe this will happen? Do I believe it's realistic, achievable, and within our reach? I'm optimistic. I'm optimistic because I see signs of positive change. Last year, we co-founded with Microsoft and Nokia Tech Against Trafficking, a coalition that now includes Amazon, AT&T, Salesforce.org, and Vodafone. And our goal is to work with global experts to accelerate and scale the impact of promising tech solutions. There are technology companies that stand ready to play their part as a team in making this happen. And we know the world will only be changed by our actions, not our opinions. And I invite you to support this. and to play your part. Thank you.
Thank you, Eric. A fitting finale to this panel is the discussion of working together and highlighting your observations about the failure of human interfaces. I think the call for enforcement for a level playing field, the call for investment of resources, the call for harmonization, and the call for partnerships are strong messages. Thank you very much. And with that, we will turn to our interventions. We will begin first with the Russian Federation, followed by the Holy See. Sir, the Russian Federation, floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would also like to thank the OSCE for this invitation to the conference of the Alliance here at the OSCE. We see this as an important international platform for exchanging views and for making progress in combating trafficking. Sometimes we have to make our statements in somewhat of a Twitter style, but we hope that the quality will not suffer. We think that this at this event, we should not forget the most important goal of our work. We think it important too that the results of this annual conference be thoroughly studied at the Secretariat, at the office of the Co-ordinator against human trafficking, and also the relevant agencies in the participating states. We also thank the organizers for the fact that among the speakers there were people from the different countries which historically have been major markets for human trafficking, for sexual exploitation and labor exploitation. And in this respect, we would like to recall that for effectively combating human trafficking, we need a comprehensive, multidimensional approach. We need to, we want to note the Milan Ministerial Council decision on combating human trafficking with an emphasis on unaccompanied minors. Russia, together with the delegations of many other participating states, worked hard to convince all delegations, including one particular delegation, to join the consensus, and the decision was taken. And we hope that this will help to further international cooperation in this area. And a final point, a proposal, we would be grateful to the OSCE if at the annual conference, if this could be not just a series of lectures, not just a series of presentations, but a dialogue. And if we could have the chance to hold the conference over 2 full working days. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I turn now to the Holy See, followed by Ukraine.
Thank you, Mr. Moderator. As the full statement of the Holy See will be distributed, and in the interest of time, allow me simply to offer a quote from Pope Francis, stressing the need to put victims at the heart of our efforts to combat human trafficking. I quote, "There is a need for just laws which are centered on the human person, uphold fundamental rights, and restore those rights when they have been violated. Such laws should also provide for the rehabilitation of victims, ensure their personal safety, and include effective means of enforcement which leave no room for corruption or impunity." End quote. In closing, the Holy See would like to thank the organizers for having brought us together, and to all the speakers and participants for their valuable contributions to this 19th Alliance Conference. Thank you, Mr. Moderator.
Thank you. We now turn to Ukraine, followed by Uzbekistan.
Good afternoon. I would like to greet all of the participants at this event and to thank you for this opportunity to participate. I would like to say that, yes, in Ukraine, we also have criminals, and everyone already said this. Criminals are constantly on the move. They are always improving their means of doing their crimes, and they use all of the innovations in the area of ICT. Often criminals use and act in 2 to 3 different countries, starting for the country of origin, transit, and destination. And this is what brings us together and working together amongst all of the law enforcement agencies in our countries in pooling our resources and combating these crimes. In Ukraine, as well as in other countries, we are facing similar problems, starting from the access to Messenger, to closed chats, to video streaming, where there is sexual exploitation going on. Anyone, whether they want it or not, leave a digital trace behind them. And this is what we need to do, is to catch them when they make mistakes, when they can make errors, where what they're doing is no longer under control. And it is up to us to find their mistakes in the digital sphere and to expose them. And this is the way we will be able to work more efficiently, to be more targeted in our work, and to find these criminals and hold them to account. Every country has their own advances and methods in the area of digital technology in combating and preventing human trafficking. And we have these in Ukraine as well. I would like to thank the trainer from the OSCE who elaborated the training course on preventing human trafficking through using information technology. I think that all of this information, all these ICT methods need to be distributed and disseminated better. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We now turn to Uzbekistan, followed by the Skels Foundation.
Ladies and gentlemen, today we're now coming to here in the 21st century, this century of development of information technology. It does not always work to our benefit. Twitter, the social media, they are often used for illegal purposes. And now with international payment systems and so on, we see how all of this is being used for illegal purposes. And so today's event, this Alliance event, is all the more relevant. We would also like to thank the Secretariat and the Office of the Special Representative for Combating Human Trafficking for every year holding this important, very much needed event at which we can discuss the different aspects of human trafficking, ICT this year. Next year we propose discussing the women, because women should not be an object of trafficking, but we hold events on human trafficking in Uzbekistan. We work with the mission in Uzbekistan. We work closely also with the OSCE Secretariat, with ODIHR. And as Mr. Mancini noted, legal cooperation is also increasing because the judges are responsible for these cases and for bringing the people to justice who are involved in these crimes. And we hope also to begin work on gender and injustice also. And we want to express our readiness, the readiness of our agencies to work together to combat this kind of transnational crime through the Gender Justice Project. And once again, we'd like to thank the OSCE Secretariat and the Special Representative, and to thank all of the interpreters also who have helped us over this 1.5 days to work together. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We now turn to the final intervention from the Skels Foundation.
The Skels Foundation is a global research center against sex trafficking since 25 years. I'd like to come back to an important idea which was developed yesterday. 1%. 1% of victims are rescued every year. 1% of traffickers are convicted every year. 1% of sex buyers are dissuaded. 1%. 10 years ago, we had the same figure in Vienna at an international conference organized. Are we going to stay at this level of impact over the next 10 years. What can we do? We believe that we need to better inform media and opinion leaders on the size of this criminal business. According to our estimate, more than $300 billion are created by sexual exploitation every year. We need to better inform about the global impact of this issue on the criminal and human rights dimension. We need to ask to each stakeholder with a specific focus on the business to play his part. Last, we strongly believe that this is the role of this audience, leader and expert, to hammer this message. If we don't do it, who is going to do it? So, I call for a large mobilization of all of us to support this message. 1% of efficiency against human trafficking is not enough. Help us to do more. Play your part.
Thank you very much. And that concludes panel 4. Thank you all for your attention. We're going to move straight to closing remarks from the Secretary General. So if everyone could keep their seat while we excuse the panel, that would be much appreciated. Thank you very much. Okay. Thank you, everybody, for your patience. We've come to the final session of our conference, and I'm delighted to introduce the OSCE Secretary General Thomas Greminger to deliver closing remarks. Ambassador Greminger was appointed Secretary General of the OSCE in July 2017 for a 3-year term, and he joined the diplomatic service of the Federal Department of Foreign Affairs in 1990 and has held several senior management positions during his career. From 2010 to 2015, he was the permanent representative of Switzerland to the OSCE, serving as chair of the Permanent Council during Switzerland's 2014 OSCE chairmanship. Ambassador Greminger holds a PhD in history and the rank of lieutenant colonel in the Swiss Armed Forces. And on a more personal note, I want to add that Secretary General Greminger has been a strong advocate on behalf of the OSCE's work on trafficking. He spoke last year at our ICAT site event at the United Nations and at the closing ceremonies of our simulation exercise in Vicenza, Italy in December. And he also champions issues that have come up repeatedly during this conference, including effective multilateralism and the need to focus on gender equality. And in 2012, he was awarded the OSCE White Ribbon for his long-standing support of gender equality. Thank you so much for joining us, Secretary General. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Val, and thank you for your kind introductory words. On my behalf, dear colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, dear participants at this year's Alliance Conference, good afternoon. Thank you so much for attending this important event and for actively engaging in the discussions. I hope that you will carry the enthusiasm and the energy generated at this meeting back home to your colleagues and friends. I also hope that your participation will help to stimulate effective policies and concrete, practical work at the local, at the national, and at the regional level. Over the past 2 days, speakers highlighted some of the extraordinary challenges that we are facing today. Technology and the internet in particular are providing traffickers with opportunities to dramatically enlarge the market for human trafficking. The progressively more sophisticated use of technology by the traffickers adds additional layers of complexity for law enforcement and affords traffickers an unprecedented level of anonymity. Technology enables traffickers to carry out truly global operations with significant impacts on border security. Technology contributes to an increase in the number of human trafficking victims and a corresponding increase in the illegal proceeds that trafficking generates. In sum, we can conclude without a doubt that ICT-facilitated trafficking is a grave threat to security in the OSCE region and the human rights of its people. Our task now is to figure out how to overcome these challenges and harness technology as an asset in combating trafficking. Here, I would like to draw your attention to 4 points that were highlighted during the conference. First, we need to listen. We need to listen to survivors and learn from their experiences. In addition to being a great source of inspiration and motivation, survivors can help us find the right responses. Their insights, their advice allow us to better understand how criminals use technology to exploit people, so we can develop strategies to take effective countermeasures. Second, we need to partner. We need to partner with civil society and in particular with the private sector. Without their expertise and resources, state efforts to curb the misuse of technology by traffickers while making technology work as an enabler for counter-trafficking simply cannot succeed. Third, broad multi-agency cooperation to combat ICT-facilitated trafficking must include parts of government, such as cyber police, that may not have been considered stakeholders in the past. And finally, and fourth, OSCE participating states should seek opportunities to leverage technology as force multiplier in their anti-trafficking work, to prevent exploitation, protect victims, and to hold traffickers accountable. Admittedly, more sophisticated use of technology comes with a considerable price tag. But it is the only way to fight tech-driven crime in the modern world. Dear colleagues, technology carries great potential for advancing OSCE commitments and implementing the OSCE's action plan. We are discovering this also in our analysis of the OSCE's own supply chains. Here, the use of new technology will help us to map trafficking risks so that we can mitigate against them. Before closing, I would like to thank all speakers who have contributed to the success of this event. And in particular, I would want to thank Melanie Thompson for her testimony and encouragement to keep our good efforts. And I also thank Val and his team for the excellent organization. To all of you, once again, thank you. Thank you for attending the Alliance Conference this year, and I hope to see you back next year and wish you the best of success in your work in this field. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, sir. I'm not sure I'm quite ready to start planning next year yet, but I appreciate your enthusiasm, and we look forward already to picking a delightful topic. As we conclude, let me offer two thoughts. First of all, let me echo the Secretary General. Please take the lessons, the practices, the information that you've learned at this discussion back to your capitals, to your organizations, to your companies, to your communities, and use it to start a conversation about what steps can be taken. And the second point is, at the Office to Combat Trafficking in Human Beings, we're here to serve the participating states, and so we are ready to assist in whatever way we can in that conversation, whether it be through raising the awareness of this issue, raising the profile of the issue, offering technical assistance or guidance, offering promising practices. In whatever way we can, we're here to serve you, and so please call on us if we can be of assistance. Finally, thank you. Thank you to all the participating states who attended. Thank you to the participating states who sponsored the attendance of their representatives from their own countries. Thank you for your interventions. Thank you also to the many, many speakers and moderators over the course of the last couple days, and if you would please join me in a big round of applause for those speakers. Thank you. And finally, let me just say a heartfelt thank you to the team of the Office of the Special Representative and Coordinator for Combating Trafficking in Human Beings. From our newest intern to our longest senior veteran, everyone in our office has contributed greatly to this project. We're very proud of the agenda that came forward. We hope that you enjoyed it. And I think particular recognition, although everyone contributed, particular recognition needs to go to Radu Kukos, who worked many long nights putting together the content for this program. So please join me in giving a big round of applause to the whole team. And with that, thank you. I close the 19th Alliance Conference.